Brian Lehrer on WNYC. So some of you heard on Friday, in advance of Father's Day, we had that very moving call-in for dads who didn't have fathers when they were growing up, or fathers they considered good role models. Now for the day after, we'll talk about the topic of dad brains. Why that? Well, there's a new book by that title by Darby Saxby, a clinical psychologist and professor of psychology at the University of Southern California, who has spent more than 20 years studying fathers and families. Her new book is Dad Brain, The New Science of Fatherhood and How It Shapes Men's Lives, draws on largely her own neuroimaging research. She's one of the few scientists in the world who have collected longitudinal brain scans of men as they become fathers. Professor Saxby, thanks so much in advance for sharing this with us. Welcome to WNYC.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Why did you start looking at dad brains?
So I write about this in the book, but I saw my own father transform when I was a child after my parents got divorced. We shifted to joint custody, and my brothers and I were alone with him at his house every other week. And I really watched him go from a typical checked out 1980s parent to our primary hands-on caregiver who was responsible for managing our lives. And when I became a psychologist and set up my own research laboratory, I was always very interested in how parents learn to parent and how they adapt to parenthood. And I wanted to study the brain, and the idea of scanning dads to see how their brains changed emerged as the idea I was most excited about exploring.
Is this in part to provide scientific evidence that it's in the interest of fathers to be more involved with their children rather than not?
Certainly. I mean, we know that care is transformative and that we learn a lot and that we derive a lot of meaning from the parenting role. And this was something not only that I saw in my laboratory, but in speaking to fathers as I was researching the book about their own experience and what they derived from the parenthood role, that there was a sense of purpose and a sense of legacy and connection that they took inspiration from.
And listeners, we can invite a few calls here in the time that we have, or texts. Like maybe younger fathers want to weigh in on how you see yourself parenting differently than your fathers of older generations, because things are changing. Are you going into fatherhood with more intentionality, more intention to have better relationships with your kids? I think that's maybe the bottom line of what we heard from those dads who called in on Friday who didn't have fathers or good role model fathers themselves growing up. Those callers thought so much about what kind of father they wanted to be, so much intentionality. How about you, just in a generational comparison in your family? 212-433, WNYC, 212-433-9692. Do you think if somebody did a brain scan of you as an active father, they would find some benefits for yourself? 212-433, WNYC, call or text, 212-433-9692 for Darby Saxby, author of Dad Brain, The New Science of Fatherhood and How It Shapes Men's Lives. Just as a historical arc question, you document a pretty dramatic shift that's already taken place in fatherhood over the past several decades. You write that partnered fathers in the United States nearly quadrupled their daily time with kids since 1965. How much? Because this is certainly not over, right? It launched this conversation with a lot of women in heterosexual marriages with kids, and there's going to be a lot of the same complaint, I think.
Yes. Sorry, can you say one more time what the complaint might be?
Oh, I think the complaint might be that there's still a second shift. Let's say both parents are working outside the home. The complaint would be, I still do much more than 50% of the child care and other housework, compared to the dad.
Certainly, yes. And so we've seen this real revolution in how men are spending their time and dramatic increases in hands-on parenting time in men who are dads, millennials compared to baby boomer fathers, for example. But we also see, interestingly, an increase in daily parenting time in moms as well. So parenting has become more intensive across the board. And in part, that's because we used to be more comfortable letting kids roam free and be with peers. And we now feel more pressure to supervise them closely. And so, if you look at the ratio of mother to father time, it hasn't changed as dramatically as the increase in father time that we've seen over the last few decades. Men are still doing more, but there's also a lot of variability across couples and families. And I think, and I write about this in the book, in the couple relationships chapter, there's still a sense that women are the ones that are driving what's called the mental load. So some of the planning, anticipating, and tracking that goes into maintaining the household and raising kids, that's disproportionately shouldered by moms.
But something has changed. And so for your study, you traveled to Madrid, I see, to work with the neuroscientist Susanna Carmona. And when you pooled your brain scan data from fathers in both California and Spain, you found that men's brains actually lose gray matter when they become dads. I have no idea what that means. Is that a good thing?
Yeah, so I have to caveat this when I write about it and talk about it that it sounds bad. It's probably adaptive. So we know that the brain also shrinks or loses gray matter as we learn and consolidate knowledge. So in early childhood, there's a process of pruning, and the brain actually loses gray matter from toddlerhood to school age. And we lose gray matter again as we reshape the brain in adolescence. So, what we think is happening is a streamlining of pathways that are responsible for social cognition, thinking about other people's minds, which is, of course, important when you're in parenthood and you're needing to care for another person. And that's corroborated by the fact that in both moms and dads, we see that where there's more gray matter volume loss, we also get reports of stronger bonding, attachment, and attunement with the infant. So that reshaping, that loss of gray matter seems to be supporting a healthy adjustment to new parenthood.
And one of the findings in your research, I guess you were just touching on this aspect a bit, is that not every dad's brain changed the same way. The dads who were more bonded with their babies, who took more leave, who spent more hands on time, showed greater brain changes. So, what does that tell us about the relationship between caregiving and the brain? Tell us more.
Right. So I say in the book, great parents are made, not born. It's not that you have this innate wiring that makes you a great parent. It's that your brain, your neurobiology is reshaped by practice and by repetition. And so as dads spend more time with their kids, as they engage in more care, their brains start to reflect that, and their brains become tuned to make them more sensitive and empathetic caregivers. And, if you think about the potential to parent as a dial that you can turn up or down, in many moms after a pregnancy, that dial is turned all the way up in part because of the influences of hormones and socialization. And as that dial can turn up or down. And a lot of that is determined by our culture, by our expectations of each other, and by our context, by our policy environment, like access to paternity leave. So when that dial gets turned up, our neurobiology reflects it.
Interestingly, you describe a study by the Israeli researchers Ruth Feldman and Al Abraham that looked at gay male couples raising infants, gay male couples. They found that a gay dad who served as the primary caregiver developed brain responses that look like a combination of heterosexual mothers' and fathers' brains. What does that look like?
Right. So that suggests that, it's not just about being male or female, it's about the role that you play in a child's life. So in that study, secondary caregiver, heterosexual fathers, and primary caregiver, heterosexual mothers looked similar to the brains of the secondary caregiver heterosexual fathers looked more like secondary caregivers gay fathers, and the primary caregiver gay fathers, as you said, looked like a combination. Their brain responses to their infants were sort of a combination of what was seen in both the fathers and the mothers. And I think that really underscores just the level of plasticity that we have. And, I say our superpower is that we are flexible, we're adaptable, we adjust to context, and our behaviors can reshape us. And I think you see that when you look at some of these exciting brain scan studies.
Let's sneak in one caller here. Stephen in Manhattan, you're on WNYC. Stephen, hi. I apologize. Our time is short. We have about 30 seconds for you. And turn your radio off.
I'll do it. I'll try to do it real fast. It's about the roles and the relationships. It used to be in the old days that children were seen as possessions of their parents, and people still call that. They call that my child. And I was not the natural father of this child, but was there involved in raising and ultimately adopted him. And at some point, I realized it's a boy. I said, my son is not my son. I'm his father. My prime role is as his father in taking the responsibility of choosing to be the father. And the child had no responsibility in being in that position.
Do you think
all the rights?
Your brain, or maybe your heart, changed? Or your body?
Oh, I think I changed over the length of time. Even now, I'm now beginning to relate to his children at young age.
Stephen, thank you for your call. Professor, humans are actually oddities among mammals, you write. This might surprise people. Only 5 to 10% of mammal species have fathers that care for their young. Why did our species involve fatherhood when most mammals didn't?
Right. It's really interesting. You don't see a lot of involved parenting males. And part of the reason you see it in humans is that it takes a lot of work to raise a human infant. We are born very immature. Because of the ratio of our pelvis size to our head size, we have these big social brains. It's hard to deliver us. And so, we come out, you could say, kind of underbaked. And it takes a lot of intensive care and someone who can be with us from moment to moment to raise us out of infancy. And so you really need more than just a sole caregiver. You need a team of caregivers. And so we humans evolved as what's called cooperative breeders. Another way to say that is we are allo parents. So people who are not the child's biological mother participate in care. That includes extended family, community, paid caregivers. And that's one thing that makes humans really resilient and adaptable.
And that has to be the last word. Adaptable is a good last word. From Darby Saxty, clinical psychologist, professor of psych at the University of Southern California. Her new book is Dad Brain, The New Science of Fatherhood and How It Shapes Men's Lives. Thank you so much.